We're here to answer your gaming, or game night questions. You can send your questions to questions@tabletopbellhop.com or head over to tabletopbellhop.com and click on Ask the Bellhop.
Social media works too, as mentioned earlier. We are everywhere as Tabletop Bellhop, one word. Now, the best way to get questions to me is to go through the website. That way, they don't get missed. Sorry, not mixed. Well, I guess they could get mixed. I could get confused. On the website, they're in separate emails. But anyway, I'm not going to say no to a question asked anywhere.
Today's topic comes from Canadian game designer Todd Crapper, who writes, I'm looking for an older, out of print game, Atlantic Star. I was wondering if you knew a place I could get this, or a place that sells older, out of print games like this.
Well, thanks for the question, Todd. Listeners may recognize Todd's name for one or more of our con recap episodes. Todd is the man behind Broken Ruler Games and the role playing game High Plains Samurai. Now, one of the things that I often get flack for on our show, on Twitter, on social media, is that we recommend some great sounding games. And then when people go to try to get them, they can't find them because they're out of print or impossible to find at a reasonable price. This happens more often than I would like to admit. Because at first, I didn't even realize I was doing this, right? I would sit down and I would get what's the great next step game from Catan or something. And I would just start answering it. I'll be like, okay, here's all the games I think are great next step games from Catan. It wouldn't be until after I published the post that someone would point out that every single game I mentioned on the list was out of print and sells for over $300 on Amazon. And I gotta admit, I feel bad about that because here I'm just like trying to share these great games that I played, and I didn't think of it. Like I have it downstairs. To me, it's just a game. Go grab it. I don't like getting people all excited about a game only for them to not be able to actually play it themselves. So as time has gone on, I'm much more aware of the current print status of the games I recommend. Now, I'm still going to recommend some out of print games. That's not going to change. But I do make sure that I include at least some more modern in print games whenever we do a recommendation list.
While we've never wanted to be the new hotness, it's nice if we can avoid being the old priceless.
Very true. Yeah, our entire show is hidden gem games to make you jealous that I have them and you don't. Yeah, it's not the point at all. Now, the thing though is that some of the best games ever made are out of print for whatever reason. Now, this could be the publisher loses a license. This one's actually extremely common. Or the designers passed away. Sadly, that does happen. We recently lost Mr. Loomis of Flying Buffalo Games just last week. Art files or other assets get lost. Companies fail. Kickstarters overpromise and can't fulfill. Really, any number of other reasons could come up. And when a good game goes out of print, they quickly become hard to find and often become rather expensive due to this scarcity. So, what we're going to talk about today are some sources I found to find out of print tabletop games. Plus, I'm going to actually try to find a good price on Atlantic Star.
Yep. Now, I'm sure a lot of gamers out there, particularly some of those who love some of the older classics, have their preferred ways already. So if we miss something or you know a better way, let
Mhm.
us know in the comments or chat room, and we'll pass on those tips to the listeners as well.
Plus, I'm just curious myself. There's some Grail games I've been looking for a long time that I've yet to find a good price on. So I'm interested in finding a copy of Ghostbusters 2 International, the box set. If anyone's got a good source for that one, I would love to know. The first place I always check when looking for an out of print game, especially board games, RPGs works as well, but that is at Board Game Geek, but specifically the geek market. Now, we did an entire episode on trying to navigate Board Game Geek, and we've mentioned it multiple times in the show. And we often note how poor the interface is, how difficult that site is to use. Now, they just relaunched the site with a brand new look, and I got to say, some of the stuff the site offers is still not really evident. I was actually on BGG for years before I even discovered they had a geek market. Like they have their own storefront. I knew that was there, and you can go there and get cheap promo items and add-ons and merch. But I had no clue that they had this place called the Geek Market where you can actually users of the site can buy and sell. It took me years to discover that.
Not only that, but simply by managing your collection on Board Game Geek, they make it really easy to look for people selling the games that you have marked as wanting, rather than just randomly sorting
Mhm.
through a list of 4,000 plus pages of listings.
Now, the geek market itself, I think, is done pretty well. It's a public marketplace where users can list items for sale, and other users can find those items and get in contact with the seller. It's completely free to use. Like BGG doesn't take any portion of the proceeds or any, excuse me, or anything like that. And it includes all the usual storefront stuff, shopping carts, shipping calculators, search categories, filters, and so on. Basically, all the stuff you'd expect to find in a good online store. The only difference here is that you're not buying from a store, you're buying from other users on Board Game Geek. Now, sometimes those users are actually stores, but most of the times, items on Board Game Geek I've noticed are actual gamers looking to sell copies of their games. And there are a ton of items up for sale at a given time. And I gotta say, popular games are pretty much there all the time. Like if it's current in print, you can probably find a used copy on the geek market, or even if it's a Kickstarter or something that just came out at Gen Con, you're gonna be able to find it. Now, collectible games are also often there, but they're usually at collectible prices. Now, rare out of print stuff does show up now and then, and it's worth checking back often to see if anyone's selling your grail game.
Now, I wouldn't rank their filtering system quite as robust as some, but the ability to search by your own wanted list means that you can avoid the problem I had of looking for like new
Mhm.
listings of Canadian available games with Canadian shipping and Canadian dollars and finding about 640 games
Yeah.
available.
You can't really complain about the selection. Now, the geek market does include a feedback system. This is policed by users, though, not by Board Game Geek itself. So, this is the usual when you're using a site like this, buyer beware, right? The thing, though, is this isn't eBay, right? You are on Board Game Geek with other geeks, generally alpha gamers, and the Board Game Geek people, the people who like to police that site are very vehement about it. We'll put it that way. And they're very good at keeping people honest and fair on the site, basically by really calling out anyone who's a bad actor. Overall, I gotta say it's a really solid place to buy games. Both new hotness, hard to find items. One of the things I've noticed is everything I bought on there is in immaculate shape and usually comes in better shape than if you bought it new. Everything I bought comes with card sleeves, component upgrades, or a box insert included. Like people who are selling on the site are proud to sell these games to other gamers and take good care of their stuff. In general, again, there could be people out there that are just going to toss everything in a box and sell it to you.
Now, just try and be focused or you'll get lost in the weeds quickly. And then finally, unlike eBay, expect to pay for shipping.
Mhm.
Generally, the buyer is the one expected to pay for shipping on Board Game Geek. It's just how it goes.
Yeah, the only time you'll see it where it's not is if it's a store selling, and then usually the price are so inflated it's not working. So then I did take a look at the geek for Atlantic Star. I see Danielle was actually doing the same. At the time, I saw 8 new copies for sale. The average price was about $30. There were a couple used copies. There was one as low as €5. Now I don't know what the shipping would be at that point. Now, one of the best sources to find hard to find out of print games that is not Board Game Geek and is an actual store is Noble Knight Games. Now, their motto is where the out of print is available again. And it's a fitting model because they have by far the best selection of out of print games on the web. It's pretty much a one stop shop for rare and hard to find games. This includes both board games and RPGs. The thing is, with that selection and the amount of stock they have, Noble Knight may have everything you want, but you may not want to pay the price they're looking for.
Unfortunately, it's hard to blame them when you're taking on such a major niche, and especially one that can have some real storage costs that will add up over
Mhm.
time. They have to keep their lights on. I mean, boxes not only need to be stored on a shelf, but you need to have some level of environmental control as well. You can't just throw it in some outdoor locker and leave it.
Yeah, and everything's actually bagged and boarded as well. At least for like RPG modules, they make sure everything's bagged, boarded, and graded. So
Right.
they take care of the stuff, and that costs money. Now, looking for Todd's game, Atlantic Star at Noble Knight. I did see it, but they want $52 before shipping, and that's for a used copy.
Cavis emptor.
Now, if you are worried about getting a new sealed copy of the out of print game or, you're looking for, check Board Game Co. One word, Board Game Co. All one word. They have a large section of, as they term it, heavily discounted games. And they are at a wide variety of quality levels. Like this reminds me of when you go shopping on a bookstore site with all your different fair, good, and make sure you read up what the different things mean because you want to make sure you're trying to get a complete game, right? Now, to me, the selection at Board Game Co. Never seemed to be quite as expensive as Noble Knight. The prices, though, are way better. And when they do have a game, they tend to have multiple copies of each game, and they often have them at different quality levels. So, say you're looking for Egizia, you might be able to see Egizia new, mint, and fair quality, all at different prices. Another thing that gives them a bit of a step up on some of the other sites is they do offer free shipping on orders over $100, and flat rate shipping, even if you don't spend that, is only $9.99 in the US.
Well, it's sad, but these days shipping deals can really make or break a sale, especially for those of us up here in Canada with no Han
Mhm.
Solo to cross the borders for us.
Yeah, I did stick to mostly US prices for this. I am in Canada. Some of these prices, and I know Todd's also in Canada. So some of these prices I'm quoting may be a little worse for him. I just know that most of our listeners and viewers are in the States. So I just figured it'd be simpler to stick to US. Plus, most of the good sites are in the US, Noble Knights in the US. There doesn't seem to be a Canadian equivalent, unfortunately. As far as Atlantic Star for Todd, it's only 1874 at Board Game Co. and it's listed in very good condition and complete.
And that's looking like one of the best deals we've come across so far.
Yeah, because you just add in that 9.99 shipping, except again, that's to the US. So I don't know what they would charge to ship it to Ottawa. Now I hate recommending Facebook. I really do because I have such a love hate relationship with that site and kind of like wish more people didn't use it and use something else. But I have to admit, the Facebook marketplace has become a great place to find games in your area because the marketplace is geographically located and people can set up themed stores, basically it's themed marketplace. Right in Windsor we have two that are great for finding board games. One's the buy and sell for geeks group set up by a friend of mine, and there's another one called the Windsor board game buy sell group. Both of these have been great for actually for me getting rid of games as well as finding stuff that I couldn't find all the time. Now, along with the Facebook marketplaces, you can also find people listing games for sale on their personal page or in groups. But what I find even more useful on Facebook is you find one of those massive groups with tens of thousands of people in it and jump into it and just be like, hey, is anyone selling a copy of this? I'm looking for it. That seems to work really well.
Now, unlike Board Game Geek, there is much less vetting on Facebook, and the potential
Hmm.
for being scammed is much higher. Now, luckily, there are some great people out there as well. So, as long as you take your time and do some due diligence, you can keep yourself safe. Don't rush in for the fastest deal, though.
Yeah. Also, many of the people on Facebook are willing to negotiate. You may be able to get prices lower than what you first see. At least trying to sell my games, every person who contacts me tries to get a better deal. So I have to assume many sellers out there are willing to reduce their prices. I now go with listing my stuff higher than I expect to get for it just so I can go down a bit because it seems to be so common. Now we mentioned Facebook, but there is other social media, right? Like I got a long out of print RPG box set for like nothing on Twitter. Basically I just paid shipping and all I did was I went on Twitter and went, man, I've always wanted X box set. And someone's like, hey, I've got that. If you send me shipping, I'll send it to you. I've had the same thing happen actually back on G Plus. That's how I got the Buck Rogers role playing game. Then there's your local Kijiji, Craigslist, buy and sell type sites. I personally haven't had any luck with this, but I do know other people who've gotten lucky and found games on the such sites.
Now, a general note for any users of Kijiji or online swap markets in general: take advantage of resources available in your
Hmm.
area for exchanging goods and services safely. Many places now, including police precincts,
Hmm.
have set up safe, monitored areas for exchanging goods where you can be sure you're safe. You just don't know what you're going to run into if you drop by someone's random house.
Yeah, that was something I saw the last time we were downtown Windsor. That Windsor, outside the police station downtown, there is a, I forget what they called it, but a place for exchanging goods, which I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Now I did go on Facebook. I did try to find a copy of Atlantic Star. I didn't have much luck, but I didn't go on any like Ottawa trading groups or anything like that. And in general, most of the time, you're gonna put a I'm looking for, and I wasn't gonna set that up before the show today, so I wasn't able to find a copy for Todd on Facebook or any other social media at this point. Now, here's a great one. If you go to conventions or have a large local game group, right? If you're in Toronto and the Toronto Area Board Game Society is around, you've got a large group, and those are math trades. Now, this is something else I discovered on Board Game Geek. Since joining the site, I've noticed that pretty much every con that's going to have 20 or more people, someone sets up a math trade. Now, a math trade is a trade between a whole bunch of people at once. It uses an algorithm where you go, I have these games for sale and I'm willing to accept these games. And it's a lot more complicated than that because you can rank things and you can add bonus items and all this other stuff. But basically, a piece of software decides who should trade with whom. And it's set up so that you not only get games you want, you also maximize the chances of getting rid of something you don't want and having a trade happen. So it's just a really simple match trade be Sean, Deanna, and I no longer want Sorcerer, and Deanna wants Sorcerer, but Sean wants Terraforming Mars. I don't have it, but Deanna does. But then I want DC deck builders, so I give mine to Deanna. Deanna gives hers to Sean. Sean gives his to me. That's a uber simple match trade. Think of doing that with hundreds of people.
Yeah, this is a very geek-worthy concept, but it really isn't something you can do with only a few people.
Yeah.
The math won't work out and it works with that power of math behind it. And
Yeah.
the larger numbers, the easier it is for all that math to work out.
Yeah. Now, match trades, as I mentioned, are usually done at cons. The other thing you can always watch for is almost every game convention I've ever been to has at least one vendor who has rare out of print games. It just seems to be a thing. There's always that one booth that has the rare stuff or the out of print stuff. You go to Origins, there's many of them. If you go to the Game Science booth, man, if you want the old school pamphlet style role playing books that Sean and I own a few of, you can actually get those there, which is pretty cool. The other thing to watch for is auctions. Very few cons I've gone to. I don't hit a lot of cons, but they usually have some form of auction, and auctions often include rare gaming goods.
Yeah. So next up, we've got the big players.
Yeah, third-party sellers on Amazon. Amazon itself does not sell out-of-print games. Realize that. Realize if you're buying an out-of-print game on Amazon, you're not getting it from Amazon. It's going to be coming from a third-party seller. Amazon's a great place to find out of print games, but man, these third party sellers usually want way too many from them. I do, from what I hear, actually, someone like bots that price around and get artificially inflated is the word I'm looking for. But it's worth looking, right? Over the years, I've found a few. For example, I managed to get a copy of West End Game Star Wars for $2.50, and it was in mint new condition. This is a book from the 80s. Most of the time, though, these sellers are asking way too much for games, and they seem to think their stuff's way more rare than it is. Sometimes they are that rare, but man, the price is still nuts. For example, right now, you can go to Amazon.ca. Todd, you could do this right now. Go there and pay 120.85 Canadian and get your copy of Atlantic Star, or $50 on the US store.
As always, Canadians get the short end of the pricing stick.
Yes, we do. And that's without shipping that $50 US. You got to toss that in there too. So the other big boy, of course, is eBay. At one time, this was the place I would go to find out of print stuff. To me, that's what eBay was for, really, to be honest. When it first opened, that's what I did is I looked up all the games I wanted as a kid or RPG supplements I couldn't find and tried to get them. I gotta say, not so much anymore. Like I personally have had many bad transactions. Shopping around for the right price can take just way too much patience sometimes. And then when you do find it, you often get sniped in the last 30 seconds, which is just frustrating. If there is one game you are looking for, it's probably worth setting up a save search and then just turn on email notifications and ignore eBay until you get that notification. As always with eBay, I think anyone that's used it, it's been around long enough, make sure you check the seller's feedback. There's the whole buyers beware thing going on. And I've got to say, I bought a few like new games and they were not like new. And man, any more on eBay, watch that shipping cost.
Yeah, make sure pictures of everything are there. If you don't see a picture of it, don't assume it's there or
Mhm.
even in good condition. I've had great luck with eBay for various things over the year, but rarely by looking. Almost always it's been by setting up a notification
Mhm.
and walking away. Uh, and then when that perfect thing shows up at the right price, you go in and you do all your research on that seller and decide whether or not you're going to put in, and then put in your bid
Yep. No, I agree. The other thing too is I don't trust anyone that says the game's complete. I have them list the components because I have had many complete games show up and then they don't have like the dice. And then the person's like, "Well, no, I didn't say it has the dice. You obviously have dice." I'm like, "Yeah, but this is a game with a die with a ghost on one side of it. I want that die." And so on. Uh, Overall, I'm not a huge fan of eBay. I got to admit, my opinion on it has changed. Now, taking a look right now, I do see one copy of Atlantic Star for sale. It's coming direct from Germany, sure. It's only 26.99 US though, but then you got to toss on $20 shipping.
Now, D in the chat room is mentioning watch out for stock photos.
Mhm.
These are often warning signs for, especially for used equipment.
The other one to watch for, which is now becoming unfortunately more and more common, is counterfeit items. There is not a copy of Splendor that has wooden chips instead of poker chips in the game, but you'll find many copies for $10.99 on eBay right now. That is becoming more and more of a problem, unfortunately. So here's one most people wouldn't think of, and you're going to have mixed results on this. This is a site called Abe Books, ABE Books. It's a site that aggregates sales from a huge number of used bookstores. Now, it's mostly books, as you'd expect, but you can sometimes find board games on there as well. Now, overall, Abe's very hit or miss, especially for board games. Like I have found some great deals, and then I found an imprint game selling for $3,000. It is worth taking a look at Abe, though.
It's always interesting how some of these sites come up with their prices.
Yeah,
Sometimes you have to wonder if they didn't ask their brother and he said, "Oh yeah, it's out of print. You can charge whatever you want for it."
yeah, I have no idea. Now, for Abe Books, though, where I find that site really shines is when you're looking for role playing books, RPG books, hardcovers, soft covers, and so on. I have gotten some great prices on out of print RPGs. Most of my West End Game Star Wars collection comes from Abe Books. Now, I did look for Atlantic Star. I had no luck whatsoever. There is a okay, so Atlantic Star is a board game put out by Queen Games. Well, I guess Atlantic Star was I don't have it open in front of me, but there's something tying a boat called the Atlantic Star with the Queen. So when you search Queen Atlantic Star, you get I think it was 600 pages of this one book on a book. So it might have been in there if I dug deep enough, but after about page 5, I gave up.
Yeah, Atlantic Star is actually based off of a show, something in the a historical shipping
Yeah.
adventure, and so there are lots of books about that same topic. Not
Yes.
surprisingly.
Not at all. Now, this doesn't help Todd or his quest for Atlantic Star, but since I mentioned outprint role playing games and we're talking about how to find hard to find stuff, and I know that there are enough of you out there who are just as much a fan of role playing games, if not more than board games, there are a couple more options. Now, the first one, though, and this is one that sometimes baffles me, is check to see if the game is actually out of print, especially with Drive Through RPG. Now, Drive Through RPG is a place most people think of to go get PDFs, right? Digital copies of books. But they offer print on demand on many of their products. And many of these rare out of print games aren't really out of print anymore. Like you can go to Drive Through RPG right now and buy a soft cover version of S1 Tomb of Horrors for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons for $9.99. Like you're getting the a print module right now. Like it's amazing how many times I'll see someone online bemoaning the fact that this game they want, oh my god, I really want Earth in second edition. They should reprint that, only to find out that if you go to Drive Through RPG, you can buy it in print right now.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate, but again, our RPGs are a different sort of beast in many cases because at least with RPGs, it really is just words on a page
Yeah.
and a little easier to deal with than having, that special six-sided die with a dice on one
Hmm.
side.
Very true. Now I know some people are collectors, right? I'm saying go buy a brand new copy of Tomb of Horrors. Well, you want that original printing of Tomb of Horrors from 1970, whatever, and you want it to have the old blue map in it and everything. I get it. I totally do. I was a collector. I still kind of am. I push away from that now. In that case, you want to check out Wayne's books. Wayne doesn't have the selection of a site like Noble Knight, but the prices tend to be better, and he offers free shipping at $50 US and has a ridiculously impressive collection of out of print role playing games, especially if you're leaning towards the big games like Dungeons and Dragons, Cyberpunk, Castles and Crusades, right? The stuff from the 80s and 90s.
Again, RPGs, another benefit they have is they don't take up as much
Mhm.
space, and are, depending on how you store them, a little less environmentally sensitive than a big box of cardboard generally is.
Yep, very true. Another site I was able to find that I haven't actually tried was Dragon's Trove. They seem to be really good for new and out of print role playing games. Now, I've actually not used them myself. And if you're in the UK, I got a lot of recommendations for the Shop on the Borderlands. I think it was Grognard Files, the podcast, that first opened my eyes to them, but I have heard about them many times from UK RPG fans. So that's also worth checking out. So that's pretty much it, right? There's my treasure map of sites I check when trying to find out of print games. Those are my Abe's probably the one most people wouldn't have heard of, but I hope I've given you some ideas of some new places to look, and I hope Todd, I found you a good price on Atlantic Star.
All right. Let's check back into the lobby to see if they know of any other places to check when searching for your Grail game. We've had a few people picking up stuff. We're just sort of finding things just slightly ahead of you in the list
Yeah,
on Board Game Geek and stuff. Tech was pointing out that he actually asked this same question a few months ago, and you answered him about Atlantic Star, even.
did I? I must have answered them directly.
Yeah,
That's kind of
it's
funny. It is a 2002 Spiel des Jahres winner, I think. So
right.
I got to admit, while looking for the game, I'm like, huh, an old 2002 Queen game. It looks pretty good. I know what I should do. I like Todd, right? I should buy a copy and bring it with me next year to Breakout Con and give it to Todd. I'd be like, here, I found you a good price on it. If he hasn't already went and shopped and found a copy himself.
Here we go. And Yeah, it's one of those things where Canadians just have it rough. Now, one of the nice things about board games, and you and I were talking about earlier in the day,
Mm,
is that language doesn't always matter as much.
yes.
From the pictures I was looking at, the
Mhm.
German version of Atlantic Star is just as playable as
Yes.
the English version. You don't get the instructions, but it's all pretty obvious, and you're just dealing with a few various,
Mhm.
you know, conversions from dollars to marks.
Not even that too. Like if you go on Board Game Geek, you can usually find English versions of games that are only in German. So, for example, the first time I played Wallenstein, Neil, who's actually going to come up later in the show, interestingly enough, uh, had gotten a copy of Wallenstein, this amazing cube tower game from Durken, same person who made Atlantic Star. Wow. Hey, we're all synchronicity right now. It's messing with my head. So anyway, had gotten a copy of Wallenstein, and I got to play it, and I fell in love with it. Right, I've mentioned many times I love Wallenstein, Shogun, that whole cube tower thing. But when I played Neil's copy, he had gone online, printed off copies of all of the cards in English, and glued it over top of his German cards. So he took the components and just glued the English over top because he's not a collector. He just wanted to play the game. So first time I played this game, everything was in German. And one of the things that's really difficult in that game is pronouncing the names of all the cities, right? So we're like Uber, Scuba, Newswearing, and we're doing all this stuff, right? So when the North American one came out, I actually thought it'd be easier. No, they kept all the German names, which makes sense because they're names of cities in Germany. But it was just like, wow, okay, I thought the English version would be a little easier to play. No, it's not. But literally, he made the game 100% playable. And Board Game Geek is great for that, right?
Yep.
If there's a game that's only in one language, you're going to be able to get the English translation there.
And if you don't want to be, if you're cringing at the thought of gluing things down,
Yeah,
sleeves work just as well.
yeah, yeah.
You don't actually have to destroy your copy of a classic board game, because I know there are
Mhm.
probably people out there who are just cringing in horror at the idea of gluing down English
You do what you
versions
got
on
to do.
top.
And there's also things like we talked about drive-through RPG. There's also drive-through cards, and for pretty much any game that has cards, someone has made the pattern for those cards to be able to print yourself in other languages, which is also used for other things. Like one of the things I thought was brilliant use of drive-through cards is someone had made money for Power Grid because Power Grid has some of the worst paper money in the market, and everyone knows that. And they made card versions, which I thought was cool.
Right. Yeah,
Now,
no,
to
this is
help out the Canadians, I do have one Canadian site. The problem was their selection. They don't have a selection, in my opinion. It's boardgames.ca does have a used game section. And it's kind of impressive, but like you can just browse through it. There's that little there, right? They have Stock Ticker, International Oil Man, Trivial Pursuit, Pop Culture, Klondike, Scribbage, Polyectomy, which is a Canadian game you'll see at every thrift store you'll ever go in Canada. You will find a copy of this game. It's the board game of Canada, supposedly. every time I've been in one. You've got the worst case scenario survival game, Last Chance, Star Trek Seen It, like it's Balderdash, but there are 150 used board games available here, but like I don't see anything most hobby gamers are going to want, but
Yeah.
probably worth checking out.
And again, boardgames.ca is a really good grab of a URL for what is really just an FLGS in Alberta.
Yes. Yep. It really
So,
is.
they're just they're just an FLGS.
Yeah, that happens to also buy used games, it looks like, from their local Value Village.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they probably get some dropped off from some of their locals.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Again, it's worth checking out your local
Yeah.
FLGSs to see if they've got anything. If it's your Grail game, it may not happen, but if you're just looking to, pick up something a little gently used, you might get lucky.
I gotta admit, that is one thing I wish the local game stores did was commission's the wrong word. What do you call that? Where you give them the item, they sell it for you and take a percentage.
Consignment.
Consignment. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wish our local stores sold used games on consignment. I've suggested it to them multiple times. I don't see what they're losing by doing it. You've been in the store. There's lots of room there. It's not like it's gonna take up space that could be with other
Realistically,
inventory.
consignment is a accounting management problem.
Yeah,
It's the only it doesn't it if you're a consignment store, it's great because your entire
right.
business is that way. But if you're not a consignment store, it's a little more problem too.
I guess so. I just wish I have games I would get rid of, and I like buying used games. I like
Yeah.
saving money on games.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. So that's it for this week's Ask the Bellhop. If you'd like to read more gaming and game night topics like this, be sure to check the blog at tabletopbellhop.com and click on Gaming Advice.
If you got a question for us, head over to the website, click on Ask the Bellhop, or email us at questions@tabletopbellhop.com.